I'm honored to welcome Jeff Moffitt, our distinguished guest, to the Aviate with Ananya podcast. He has a very extensive background in the United States Air Force, including roles as a division chief, squadron commander, and director of operations, and now is retired as an instructor at my high school. He plays a very significant role in inspiring many people, including myself, to join the JROTC program in my high school. Thanks once again, Lieutenant Colonel, for joining us.
Thanks, Ananya. It's a pleasure.
When you were a commander at Fort Hood, Texas, you led a team with very diverse technical specialties. How did you manage human relations to create a very united team environment?
Great question. So one of the things I picked up in my leadership journey was that people have a lot more enthusiasm for implementing ideas that they feel are their own than they are for implementing what they think is someone else's idea. So if you want to get a group of people to have buy-in and really get good results, it's helpful to start by making sure that they have a chance to give their inputs on what needs to be done. So it wasn't a complete democracy, obviously, but we got we at the start of my command, I put together a planning conference, and we pretty much had almost everybody in the unit in there, and I think that got us on the same page about where we needed to go over the next 2 years. I wanted everybody to feel ownership of the squadron, so we made a list of things that we would be required to do over the next 2 years. These were things like deployments, sending people overseas, trained and ready to go, big major training exercises, and other things. So those are the things that we had to do no matter what. But then we also made a list of things we wanted to do, and that's where I think we got a lot of enthusiasm. At the end of the planning conference, we wrote a set of vision statements. So a vision statement is a set of conditions that will exist in the future if you are successful in creating those conditions. And then for each of those vision statements, we had a mission essential task list, and that was a little bit of a laundry list of things we needed to do weekly, daily, and monthly to get those vision accomplished. And I think we were pretty successful, and I think that having that time together with everybody did a couple things. I think it got buy-in, but I think it also freed people to take initiative because they were already kind of told what the goal was. And so I think they were more innovative and creative in the way they went about it, rather than having to always ask, for step-by-step directions. So the hard part, I think, is once you have that vision and the task that you've set before you, now you have to stick to it, because it's easy to get distracted by the mundane stuff that comes along or things that you didn't plan for. So that's the last thing I'd say about that. You gotta have a system that takes you down that list of tasks and gets it done.
Yeah, I do agree. It's always important to have a vision and also like the determination to carry out what you plan. In your role as the flight commander and assistant director of operations, you trained and deployed personnel for combat in Iraq especially. So what were some of the most critical aspects of this training, and how did you ensure the success of your team?
So they say that under pressure, you don't rise to the occasion, but you sink to the lowest level of your training. In a nutshell, success in combat, success and safety, that is, depend on training to a standard, an objective standard of proficiency that you need to be at before you go into combat. So the mindset has to be that we're gonna do our training, and we're not gonna go home when the clock says 5 o'clock. We're gonna go home when the job is done. So we used to say we would train to standard, not time. So sometimes that could take pretty long hours. But the bottom line is you learn techniques and procedures and you practice them so that you know what to do and how to do it when the time comes. Because when the time comes, you'll be under stress and you can't expect to do any better than you did when you were training. So that I think that answers the question of what we did.
If I remember, you were also a B-1B bomber aircraft commander. Could you perhaps share a challenging or memorable mission or experience you had during your time?
Sure. The most challenging part of my B-1 career was learning to become a flight lead. The B-1 is supposed to deploy as a two-ship formation. So there'll be two B-1s flying together. And as the flight lead, you're responsible for the safety and training of your flight. This took a lot of preparation, and I'm talking hours and hours. People watch movies like Top Gun and it shows you all the glamorous parts of flying. But I would say for every hour I spent flying, I probably spent at least 2 hours planning and debriefing. I probably spent even more time writing performance reports and other administrative stuff in the Air Force. So if I was scheduled to lead a two-ship on Tuesday, a training mission, for example, I needed most of Monday to lead the crew of 8 crew members in mission planning. So that included when you set out, you have a target that is for your training scenario, and you have to match the right type of weapon, like how big does your bomb need to be? Does it need to be fused to detonate above the ground, below the ground? Does it need to be armor penetrating, or is it an area target where you can just kind of shotgun bombs out? So you spend an hour or two deciding what weapons and how many you need. From that, you back up and you do a threat analysis of the enemy's integrated air defense system. So if the enemy has a target that's worth you striking, then it's worth it to them to defend it. So they're going to put anti-aircraft artillery and surface-to-air missiles all around it. They're also going to support that with fighter aircraft. So you have to thoroughly analyze the radar systems that they're going to use to track you and engage you. You pick an attack axis and an altitude. You brief the crew on all the kind of contingencies. So if this happens, we're going to do that. If A, B, and C don't go well, we'll do X, Y, and Z. Another example would be if we show up to the day that we're going to fly, and one of the airplanes isn't ready to fly, how long can we wait before the other plane has to take off so that we can get our formation training done? So mission planning started, at about 9 o'clock in the morning. We would have a morning brief sometime around 8:30, but that could go to 4 or 5 in the afternoon. But to get to the point where you could lead the mission, the crew in that Monday mission planning, you had to spend 4 or 5 hours before that. So typically on a Sunday afternoon or maybe late Friday, I would prepare for it. You got to go through all the training requirements that the people need. You have to plan how you're going to do everything because you have training objectives you have to accomplish and so on. So I might come in on a Sunday afternoon or maybe stay late on a Friday to get that done. So let's say the day that the flying comes around and you might show up at 5 in the morning for an 8 o'clock takeoff. You might fly a 7 or 8 hour sortie. And then you come back and you debrief every little detail. What went wrong, why did it go wrong, and what the fix is for the next time. And so you could be there until past midnight or 1 in the morning, sometimes getting that stuff done. So most challenging was definitely flight lead upgrade. That was a pretty grueling training program, but I got through it. Getting back to your question though, the question was 2 parts. The most memorable part of my flying career would be probably my 2 combat deployments. We would show up for a briefing 3 or 4 hours before takeoff. We would pre-flight the airplane, then we would drive about 7 hours to Afghanistan. By drive, I mean fly. We'd be on call to provide close air support for as few as 4 hours or long as 9 or 10 hours. And then we would go home. We would air refuel 3 times each mission. When we got over Afghanistan, we would be working with soldiers and Marines. When I was there wasn't a whole lot of fighting going on. There was kind of a lull in the conflict. So most of what we did was we made noise with our airplane and did high-speed, low-altitude passes to intimidate the Taliban. Was mostly what we did. But it was a really memorable deployment. Sometimes I would be up for 30 hours before I was done with my mission. So,
how many years into your career were you when you were the B-1B bomber aircraft commander?
My path to that was a little bit delayed because I went to graduate school. Normally, you either go through ROTC or the Air Force Academy, and then you go straight to pilot training. But I got a deferment to do a graduate program. So that was 2 years of graduate study. Then it takes about, I think it's 13 months to go through initial pilot training for the Air Force. And when you graduate initial pilot training in the Air Force, you're not assigned to any kind of particular airplane. So you know the basics of flying. You can take off and land a pretty high performance aircraft. And you know some basics of flying formation, low level navigation. But then you get to your platform. In my case, it was the B1. And I probably had a 6-month wait before I could fly, but there was ground school academics, and then there was scheduling delays. The B1 is very maintenance intensive, so a lot of times you're scheduled to fly, but you can't because it's not time to go. So I would say it was probably another 2 years before I was a good co-pilot, and then maybe another 6 months before I became an aircraft commander. Then I did some other things. I was I call it adult supervision for the competitive glider program at the Air Force Academy. Then I came back and upgraded to instructor.
Super cool.
So let's see, I graduated in 1999. from the Air Force Academy. I finished pilot training 2 years later, so that'd be grad school was 2 years later, 2001. And then I was an aircraft commander around the time of 2005. So it's quite a long apprenticeship.
Yeah, like a long lead up to get to where you were. Okay, yeah. Well, that leads perfectly into our next question, since we're talking about graduate school. I spoke to you and you said you had a master's in operations research from MIT. How do you think your education influenced like your problem solving skills and decision making in your military roles and teaching roles?
So I enjoyed my studies, but the best part of that was that I ended up meeting my future wife, Sue, in Boston. So when you become a pilot in the Air Force, you spend a lot of time in this training pipeline, and the Air Force invests a lot of money in you. I think it's $1 million just to put you through pilot training, and that's then you got to go get 400 or 500 hours in the B1 at $30,000 per hour flight cost. So the Air Force wants you to fly when you're a pilot. So there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity to employ algorithms or quantitative analysis that I got in grad school. But sometimes the value of an education is teaching you how to think. So I think there was still a lot of value in it. I just was never assigned to a job that required a whole lot of it, just in my particular case. So, anyways, I will say that the value of the education you get is training your mind to think. So you may not want to be a physicist or a mathematician, but there's value in those degrees as compared to maybe some less rigorous programs. I won't name which one, but underwater sports recreation management.
Or basket weaving.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right. Yeah.
You can get that degree if you want it, but
but
why bother?
Yeah, well, it was great hearing about your career in the Air Force. Could you explain how you transitioned from the U.S. Air Force to becoming a JROTC instructor?
Sure can, yeah. So I ran into an AFJROTC instructor when I was at a friend's house a couple years before I retired. I had no idea. I didn't do JROTC in high school. I mean, I had friends that did it, but I had never thought about becoming a high school teacher or a JROTC instructor. When I got to talking to him, I kind of realized that he had a lot of job satisfaction, and he also had a really good quality of life. So now as a teacher, I get to work with young people, hopefully have a good impact on them. I also get 9 weeks out of the year plus 11 vacation days. So I have very little stress, and the job lets me influence great young people like you, and I'm pretty happy with it.
It's very interesting. Your experience as a B1 instructor pilot also involved training new aviators, just like how here you're like talking to young people, and as an instructor you had to train new aviators. What skills or qualities do you think are very vital in aviation, and how do you go about teaching that?
Sure. Number one, I would say you have to be humble. And the reason you have to be humble is because you're constantly getting feedback in this upgrade process. So you start out in that pilot training, you have a grade sheet every sortie. So you're always taking a constructive feedback at the end of that sortie so you can get better. You also have to persevere when things don't go well. So I was a really good student in school. I always got all A's, but in pilot training, it was difficult for me. There was this one particular part of pilot training that I was having a really hard time with, and that was low-level navigation. It was really challenging for me. Eventually, I figured it out, but I would say, learn early in life as you can to cope with adversity is my 2 cents on that. I think that'll help you no matter what you do in life.
Yeah, and your career has involved many leadership roles. What advice do you also think that young leaders could benefit from, whether it's for a military career or becoming an educator or a pilot?
Great. So when I was a kid, the movie Top Gun came out. That was 1986. I was about 10 years old. And my dad had already kind of talked to me a little bit about military aviation. He had wanted to do it, but he couldn't because of his heart. But when I saw that movie, it was cemented in my mind. I was going to be a fighter pilot in the Navy too. I would have played Russian roulette for the chance to be a fighter pilot for most of my young life. After initial pilot training, I ended up being a bomber pilot, but I would say that I came pretty close to realizing my dream. So I'm going to kind of take this in 2 directions. Sometimes if you don't get exactly your dream, you'll get something that might even be better. So I was initially really disappointed that I didn't get a fighter, but looking back, I have no regrets. The B-1 is a very fun airplane to fly. It does most of what air-to-ground fighters do. But unlike some of my friends who flew fighters, I don't have any back problems. So a lot of my friends who are in their mid-40s, they flew fighter jets and they pulled G's, and that strains the back for a lot of people. So at 47, I'm glad I didn't get assigned to the F-16. Sometimes, as Garth Brooks, the song goes, sometimes I thank God for unanswered prayers. But that said, I feel like I pretty much did realize my childhood dream, even if it was only maybe 90% of it. But I would say that, yes, go confidently in the direction of your dreams, but it's probably not going to be enough to make you happy. There's a lot of really successful people out there who aren't necessarily fulfilled, right? And the example I always go to is Tom Brady. I hate to admit this because I'm not a Patriots fan, but he's the greatest quarterback that ever was. I mean, 7 Super Bowl rings. And he, at the age 27, he'd already won a Super Bowl. And that is every little boy's dream. I'm going to be the quarterback in the Super Bowl, right? Yeah. He lived it. And he gave an interview on 60 Minutes where he kind of says, you know what, I'm 27, I won the Super Bowl. And I'm kind of like, is that all there is to life? So, he got his dream, but it wasn't enough to fulfill him. So my advice to anyone aspiring to do anything is, yes, go confidently in the direction of your dreams, shoot for the moon, strive to accomplish it all, but you have to find something else besides achievement to base your life on. For me personally, that's my Christian faith and my family. When one of my daughters scores a soccer goal at her soccer game, or my son makes a block in football, that is more fun to me right now than any promotion I ever got or anything I ever did in the jet. So I feel like I had a pretty interesting career, but no matter what you do in life, I'd say that family and relationships are probably the most important thing, even more important than the career. So I always wanted to have a family, but I thought a lot more about my career when I was younger. Looking back, I'm just going to say that being a husband and a dad is the best thing I've ever done. So.
In your current role as a Air Force Junior ROTC instructor, what do you think? We've already gotten a hint at this, but what inspires and motivates you? Okay.
I hope to make a positive impact on the lives of students. I'm also patriotic, and I appreciate the chance that JROTC allows me to, quote unquote, develop citizens of character dedicated to serving their nation and their community. That's actually the purpose of JROTC, and it's established by Title 10 U.S. Code. America's not perfect, but there's a reason why so many people want to come here, because it's still the land of opportunity, and you just can't get that in a lot of parts of the world. So I'm motivated to raise up citizens of character who are devoted to serving their nation and their community.
Well, thank you so much once again, Lieutenant Colonel Moffitt, for sharing your incredible journey with us on the podcast. We greatly appreciate your time and the inspiration you provide. So thanks once again for coming on here.
Thanks, Ananya.